Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the medium in the middle. This podcast is going to walk you through my journey into mediumship and how I came to realize that I could communicate with souls that have passed over. My adventure started just over a year ago when unusual situations started happening to me. It wasn't until I really started to pay attention to them that it all started to come together. I wrote down everything that I was experiencing this past year in a little black book, and this podcast is going to be a recap of all of those memories leading up to where I am today in my mediumship journey. I will be releasing new episodes every Tuesday, and I recommend listening to the podcast in order, starting with episode 1, as my story will unfold more week by week. If you would like to stay connected with me, follow me on Instagram at mediuminthemiddle. Welcome to episode 32. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Stephanie, and I'm very excited about this week's episode. I know that I say that every week, but this time for real, because this week's episode is going to be with someone who has experienced very many mediumship experiences with me. So she's going to be telling her side of the story as the receiver. So for this entire podcast, you've heard me tell my story of my point of view and what I experience when I deliver messages from spirit or what happens to me. But I would really like to give the other side of the story and talk to someone who was on the receiving end, what it was like, what emotions came up, did she believe me or not, and just really get to what's it like to be on the receiving end of a message from spirit. And especially because a lot of the ones that she experienced were not sessions with me. So this isn't someone coming to see a medium where they're expecting something. This was, we're sitting at your kitchen table and Grandpa came. This was, we're at Thanksgiving dinner and Grandpa came again. Or really cool experiences that she got to experience. By this time, I think that I've channeled for Dana and her family 5 people. Let me count. Oh my God, I just counted. It's actually 7 between everybody. So 7 people from her family has been channeled. And I'm just going to let you know what episodes that are about her, because up until now, she has been going by the fake name of Tara. So as I mentioned before, I do give everyone different names in the podcast just to protect their identity. But we have spoken about this and she feels comfortable saying her name. So if you are interested in what episodes are specifically about her and her family, I'm going to list them off for you now. So episode 4, Who is the Man in the Washroom? Episode 9, Josh. Episode 13, House Clearing. Episode 23, I Thought You Said No Spirits Were Here. And episode 25, The Unexpected Family Dinner Guest. That one was a crazy experience. I can't wait to talk to her about it. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Dana. She is going to be coming on to the podcast and we're going to talk about all these episodes and what it was like for her. And if she's had any mediumship experiences before this. So I'm really looking forward to you hearing this conversation, and I hope you enjoy a different perspective. Let's jump right into it. Hello, Dana, otherwise known as Tara on the podcast. Thank you for coming on Medium in the Middle. Welcome.
I'm so happy to be here, Steph. I can't even tell you. And for now the world to know what I've been going by on the Medium in the Middle podcast is so wild. I feel so revealed.
Yeah, the secret's out. Tara is Dana. So I'm excited that you're here because we're going to tell your side of the story from being on the receiving end of many of my episodes. There's been 5 episodes about you and your family, and I just counted, and I've channeled 7 people for you, which is crazy. But I'm excited to share kind of what your experience was like and let the listeners hear how it is to receive a message from spirit, especially when you weren't expecting it and you never came for a session or anything. It always just seemed to happen when we were sitting at your kitchen table.
Yeah, no, you know what? And I'm so glad we're having this conversation and that I can talk about this with you and your listeners, because it's something that is just such a wild experience. And I feel like you really do have to have it happen to you to understand it and to speak on it. So I think this is a great way to talk about storytelling and to enhance that, but also to raise awareness about what it actually feels like to have a family member visit you in that type of way. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, totally. So just to give a little bit of backgrounds, we are friends, very good friends. We met both working at Lululemon how many years ago? 3 years ago?
I would say 3.
4
Yeah.
years ago?
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, and we've just been friends ever since. So these experiences happened organically. And yeah, I want to jump into the first one because this one was the craziest one for me because it was one of the first times that I had actually channeled spirit. It's episode 4, Who is the Man in the Washroom? So we were actually at your house working on an event for Heroic Humans, which we will talk about at the end of the episode. I want you all to know about Heroic Humans. And we were working so hard, I remember, and your mom really wanted to talk to her dad. So the listeners have heard the episode, so I won't replay it, but I just want you to share like what your experience was like from when I went into the bathroom and then came out and was like, Dana, who's this guy that just scared the shit out of me when I walked in?
Yeah, I mean, for context too, like, you know, many of our home layouts, the Steph went to the washroom and I was sitting in the kitchen. So I couldn't see where Steph was. Like, I was sitting in the kitchen, and when she came around the corner and, you know, said that there's someone here, it was like, what are you even talking about? Like, are you like, what did you do in the bathroom while I was in the kitchen? It was so wild. And it is one of those experiences that's like, you have no idea what to say because it's just so something you just never experience. Like, from someone who's not in the mediumship world, it's so interesting to experience, because it's like, what do you even mean? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, and that episode was the first time that I kind of did it for an audience because you were there. We had another friend there that we were working with. And then we instantly called your mom up. And in the middle of the whole thing, your mom's husband came. So it was kind of this big family ordeal. What were you thinking? Like, what was running through your mind in that moment?
Well, you know what? Like you just said, I was like, let me go get my mom immediately, because this is her dad, right? And he died when she was so young that I know very little about him. So that's why when I said, you know, I have to go get her, it was this like exciting thing that she was probably maybe 60 at the time when this first incident happened, and she had no contact or anything, obviously, with her dad from between being 60 years old and when he passed when she was 7. So this was like, you know, really exciting, really energizing, kind of scary, and it was just like, let's get the whole family in here right now so we can hear what Steph has to say. And that's why Mark came into the room as well. And like I said, it's just like, it was an exciting thing because it's like she'd been waiting her whole life almost, right, to hear from her dad. And how exciting would that be for someone, from having someone be gone for so long?
Yeah, and I remember when the soul was first coming through, I kept being like, no, that he's 37, he's 36, like he's a young soul. And you were like, yeah, my grandpa died when my mom was 7, because I didn't know that. You just assume grandpa, they're older. But I kept saying, no, he's a younger soul. And then right after, we all kind of, I remember staring at each other, just deer in the headlights eyes, like, what just happened? Because I kept telling your mom, it's not going to happen now. It's not going to happen now. I remember saying that to her.
Yeah.
And when Mark walked in the room, I turned to him, and then that was when his brother and dad came right after that.
Oh my God. That was insane. Like, that was insane. I can't even tell you. Like I'm smiling right now because it was the most wild experience. And like the shaking, the oh my gosh, like you know, your listeners probably know that portion of it, but that was crazy.
Yeah, the shaking thing still gets me to this day because I can't recreate it. It's not something that I can like make my body do, which is why it freaked me out so much. And I just kept remember him saying, "Why are you shaking? Why are you shaking?" And
Yeah.
I didn't know why until
No,
we figured
literally.
out that
Yeah, no, literally, like from my vantage point, this session with my grandfather had just ended, you know, really incredibly beautiful. We're all bawling our eyes out, crying. There's so much emotions, there's so much going on. You know, Steph had just had this like crazy experience. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting across the table from you, and you start shaking like a leaf, like vibrating in your chair, like you're
yeah,
shaking. And I'd never seen you channel in person. And I'd also never experienced mediumship in this way personally. So I had no idea what was going on. Like, I'm like, are you okay? Does this happen all the time? Can I help you? Are you ill? Did I do something wrong? Like, what is going on here?
yeah, and I wasn't used to it because this was one of my first times too. So I remember you guys saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Yeah. Yeah. And you have like four people sitting across from you being like, what's happening now? And looking at you for answers, and you don't even know what to say. So it was wild seeing that experience start kind of from that shaking. And I think if I recall, you know, we started to talk about who else it could, how did we come up with it that it was Mark's brother? Because he had Parkinson's,
Yeah.
which is why you were
So
shaking.
yeah, so he figured out that it was his brother. And the interesting part that he said at the end, and I talk about this in episode 9, Josh, was that at the very end he said, "I'm so sorry I didn't realize it was my brother right away. I was hoping it was my son." And that's the only thing he said. I remember. And then about a week later, do you remember when I called you on my way home from work like a
And you
psychopath?
pulled over in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was driving and pulled over because you were like exploding with information.
Yeah, so I'm driving home from work, calling Dana. This is a week later now, and she's not answering her phone. She's not answering her phone, and she always answers her phone. So I'm like, "Oh, I'll just call a million times till she answers." She didn't answer, and I was getting these hits, and I was like, "Okay, I'm 22. I died this way. I looking for my dad, all these things." So I literally pull my car over on the freeway, on the highway, and I send her like 10 text messages being like, "I think this might be Mark's son who he mentioned last week." So maybe can you talk about what it was like when you answered that text message?
Yeah, no, I remember seeing it, and it's funny because my mom and I often, you know, before this happened, we, you know, talking about Mark's son Josh was a very touchy subject. Obviously, he died very young, and it's a very emotional subject. So my mom and I would kind of tiptoe around talking about Josh because it was just such a sensitive subject. And when I got these texts from you, Steph, I like turned my phone to my mom, and I was like, "Oh my God, like, look at this. Look at what Steph just sent me." And she's, you know, what? And we're both like goosebumped and like freaking out. And it was a crazy experience. I mean, I feel like at the time you're just kind of feel speechless. Like you're like, it feels like you want to say, you know, there's absolutely no way. But like
Mhm.
it's what's actually happening. So it's so bizarre. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
And what I couldn't believe is that it just came to you at this moment of like it was so random.
Yeah, it was so random. And it's interesting because I used to drive 45 minutes to work, and that was kind of my like me alone time. You play loud music, or I would shut off the music and just think. And that's the easiest way for a spirit to contact me now is when I'm like zoning out. It's when you're not
Wow.
paying attention, and then you start to get this random information. And once you get 3 or 4 pieces of information, I'm like, okay, this is a person. I wouldn't randomly be thinking about a 22-year-old who has hair like this, who died like this. Like, those aren't thoughts that come into my mind. That's how I know that it's a spirit. And I don't even know how I knew it was for Mark. I just called you, and I'm like, this is the only person I can think of because by this time, I think I was like week 2 into realizing I was a medium. Like, this is fresh, brand new. I still think I'm crazy. I remember when I was telling you the story the first time when we were driving to the cottage being like, Dana, this is happening to me and you still need to be my friend after this.
Yeah. And I was like, whatever, crazy.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. So bothered. I'm even thinking when I took then my phone and gave it to my mom with my screen open with the messages from you, Steph. And I handed it to my mom for her to show to Mark because I wanted her to be the one who showed him, not me. And that was like a private moment between the two of them because, you know, like I said, from someone who's not in this world, like when somebody dies, you don't expect to ever obviously have contact with them or messages,
Yeah, so
I think. So for
let's
it
talk
to
about
come,
that a little bit.
yeah, for
Because
sure.
I'd like to know, like, what were your views on the afterlife before your best friend was a medium?
Yeah, right?
And you got to
Like,
speak to everybody.
yeah,
Like, did you
trick
believe in this
question.
stuff?
You know what? I feel like I've always been a very spiritual person in the sense that I just feel very connected to myself and others. I mean, so much of my work that I do with Heroic Humans and my businesses is just so much to do with connecting to other people. So I feel like I've always been aware of the feeling and the notion that you don't have to physically be here to feel connected to something or someone. But that being said, I mean, I had never had these types of experiences before. Obviously, you know, this came into your life, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's definitely like there's instances where the home we lived in for 20 years was kind of, you know, haunted and had some
We're going to
life
talk
in
about
there.
that episode.
Yeah. So there was definitely some instances where my mom and I would feel energy and we would get like feelings and sensations and a bunch of stuff, but we would never look into it more than that. It was just kind of something that you know, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I do talk about in these episodes where the people around me really just accepted this as truth. Like, no one questioned anything. No one didn't believe me. There was no battle of how I knew this or how the information was true or if one thing was off or anything like that. So I really was really supported, and especially by you and your mom. I mean, your mom's my number one fan for sure. I
Literally
love
is.
her.
Literally is.
So it was so awesome to like give that experience to her because she said that she had been trying for a big part of her life to connect with her dad and she wasn't able to get that connection. And I remember when I moved to Banff, she called me and she says, "Does that mean my dad's moving to Banff?" And I was like,
Oh my God.
"No." Like,
That
she's so cute.
statement literally gives me goosebumps because how many times she would say to me, you know, do you think that that's what this means? And I would be like, Mom, just ask Steph. Like, I can't answer that. Like, I don't know, but I doubt it. You know, I'm pretty sure that's not how it works, but you know, just ask her. And then I think me driving her to ask you all these questions is so part of like what made you guys so close because she just unapologetically asks these things. Like she's so comfortable with you and asking and getting curious. And I think it's created like this really special thing for you too.
Yeah, and I love that. I love when she texts me and she thinks, "Do you think this might have been my
Yeah.
dad?" Or "I saw this shadow last night." And
Yeah.
she's the cutest. Okay, so I want to jump into the next episode. Episode 13 was the house clearings. So this was
Oh,
actually right
yeah.
before I moved to Banff. I remember I did like 3 house clearings in a day. I was just driving around everywhere. And your house was last. So I remember I got there quite late. But maybe talk about what was happening before I did the house clearing and kind of like why I even came.
Yeah. So I live in a pretty rural neighborhood. My house is really old. It was built in the 1960s. And there is an apartment kind of in the house that the in-laws of the people who built it used to live in. And today my family uses that apartment as like a home office. So there's a bunch of offices in there. But in that space, it was rumored that there was someone who had potentially died in that apartment while living there. So this is something we knew for the whole time we've lived there for 20 years at this point. So this is something we always knew and was kind of scary, but kind of not. And, we live there. This is our home. So what can you do? Right. But as I was saying, when referencing to a couple of minutes ago, there was always this energy in the house. And it was always, well, is it this story that this person died in there? What could this energy be? And there was just like this weight and kind of loftiness in the air. And I don't know how to explain it in any other way than that, because I don't have the language or expertise that you do, Steph, but it was just like this feeling that you get. And it was more prevalent in certain areas of the house. Like, for instance, like the front foyer was really heavy. And I was home alone a lot because my parents travel a lot for business. So I would be so spooked out all the time and have all these experiences and, think I'm hearing things. And it was just kind of a character of our home that there was odd energy. Like, it was just kind of a thing. It was just known to all of us. So when Steph said that she was doing these house clearings before she left, I mean, it was a no-brainer for us to be like, get over here and see what you find. And obviously, as you've heard, your relationship with my mom, and my mom was very enthusiastic about having you come in and see what you could kind of find in there. Especially because this is after the bathroom incident, right? Like, this is after all this. So it's like, how much more can we find out? What else can you tell us? Like, don't leave. We're just getting started.
So that one was cool because you and your mom actually like kind of followed me around while I was doing the whole thing. And it was like really interactive, which was really nice. And I remember at the end, we were all standing in the foyer, almost like swaying and just looking at each other being like, we're in this weird meditative state. Like, what's happening? And I just remember thinking like, I don't know, maybe because we've been like clearing energy by that point, it was probably been at least an hour, that we were all just so zen, and I was burning sage and raking the walls and doing the whole thing. We all were just like, had this really cool moment in your foyer, and it just like felt lighter. Like the space felt lighter. And I remember the one spot that I stopped near the window and upstairs, and you were like, why are you stopping there? Why are you stopping here? What's going on here? And you said that your dog always stopped in that spot and it used to bark at nothing. And then literally, I was like, can you tell me if your dog like barks at nothing there again? And a week later or so, I was like, hey, like, is Jude still barking in that corner? And you said no. And that was so cool for me.
Yeah, no. So this was this spot at the top of the stairs that my dog would, in the middle of the night, like pitch black, during the day, all the time, like various different instances, would just stare out this window and bark at nothing with nothing there. We were just like, whatever, just a dog, who cares? And it was so weird that you stopped there and felt something weird, because it was just, it made so much sense. And then, he stopped doing it entirely. And what you're saying to how zen we were, I mean, us following you around, and I was, trying not to ask questions and trying not to tiptoe behind you too loud, and like all of these things. And it was a really calming experience to be following you around doing that. And I feel like it was just, it was very meditative. It was pretty beautiful, actually, being a part of like that process.
Yeah, and I think you were actually the first ones to follow me, because before that, I think I'd only
because we're so like nosy.
I know. No, I loved it, but I think I'd only had done like 3 house clearings. Like, I always did my own, but then people started asking for them, and now I really encourage like the owner to follow me around, because it's a lot easier when I can be like, okay, where'd you get this dresser from? Oh, you bought it from a yard sale? Okay, this makes sense of why this feels like this. Okay, what's weird about this room? What did this used to be? Did there used to be a door here? Like, it's a lot easier when the person is following me around. But I just remember it was a really, really cool experience, like when we did do it together. And then I had to leave, and then we were so sad because I moved shortly after that. But yeah. So after that, I moved to Banff. And then I came home to visit, and obviously I ran to visit you and your mom. And I remember by this point you had moved, so you're in a new place now. And when I walked in the door, the first thing your mom said is anyone here? And I was like, no. And they asked me a few more times that night, and I was like, no one's here. And then it was the next night when we were sitting with me, you, and your friend. This was episode 23. And maybe talk about that experience, because that was the first time you were like super excited to know something. You were like, tell me, is there something? Tell me.
Yeah. Well, this time it was
your side.
Yeah, well, this time it was like for me, which was, well, I didn't know that at the time, but I was excited because it was like my experience versus the other times where, there were people there for my mom or Mark. So this time was like, who could it be? Like it was just this. And we were sitting, I think it was me, you, like you said, Steph, and then a friend of mine. And we were just kind of sitting in the family room on couches, just like chatting and catching up and what have it. And one of my girlfriends, her name was Thana, she was there with us, and she's, let's just say, a little bit spooked with Steph's skills. Okay. So she's just a little bit spooked, and
which is normal.
Totally. And I mean,
totally I'm expected.
Yeah. And I'm like weirdly accepting. I'm weirdly like, oh, totally. You're a major whatever. Like, this is perfect. Like, I just think it's fantastic. So coming from someone who's a little bit questioning is like probably pretty normal. So anyways, Steph, we were kind of all sitting across from each other, and you just like started to have this look on your face.
Yeah, and the
I
look
was
by
like,
now.
yeah, and I was like, and I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. And I was like, oh, God damn it, what's gonna happen? Like, what's gonna go on here?
Here we go again.
Yeah, here we go again. And so then reacting to Steph's face, I made a face, and my friend Thana looks at me and goes, What is it? And she's almost like thinking something's behind her, because we're both looking at her. That was kind of the start of what happened. And it was just like, I can still see it perfectly in my mind.
Yeah, me too. And then I remember you said, who's here? Because you know the face. And I remember just stuffing the sandwich I was eating in my mouth.
Yeah.
And
Oh my God. No, that's what happened. You were sitting cross-legged with a takeout box on your lap, and you were eating food. And I looked at Thana. Thana started freaking out. She got from her chair, jumped, ran into the kitchen in the next room. Yeah, and was hiding. She was so scared. And, I'm like kind of scared, but, here for it. Like, I don't know, And I think I said, what did we say?
She said, I don't want to know. And I said, okay, if you don't want to know, that's fine, but I need to move away from you. So then I went into the kitchen, and then you started yelling, well, I want to know.
Well, and Thana goes, I don't know any dead people.
So then I was in the kitchen, and I said, well, if you don't want to know, I'm going to stay in the kitchen. And then I was like, but who has the set of grandparents that are both passed? Like grandma and grandpa are both passed. And she like literally started cheering. I remember she's like, oh, not me. Like, oh, they're still alive. Like, not me. And then I was like, oh, okay. And I came back into the living room all calm. And then you went, oh my God, I do. And I didn't know that for some reason. I don't know why I didn't know that.
Well, and they're on my dad's side, and I'm not super close with my dad. And you've never met my dad because he lives farther away. Like I said, I didn't even think that it could belong to me, because none of these experiences had happened to me.
Yeah,
yet, for me. So I just like didn't even think about it. I was like, it's got to be for Thana. Like, it's got to be. And I was like, I guess I do. Yeah.
And then I remember right after that, we had to call your mom because we just love her and have to tell her. And she's so sweet. I remember her being like, I thought you said no one was there.
I know. And then they were with my dog.
Yeah, Nappy.
Yeah, they were with my dog, and my dog had just died at this point, probably like a year before this happened. So, and she was like 16, and she's my little babe. So I was very excited to hear that Nappy was also in the family room sitting with me.
So I'm really excited to talk about episode 25, because this one was a big deal for what happened at Thanksgiving. So this was the same weekend, and we went to your cottage for Thanksgiving. And I remember I was going to leave in the morning. And maybe you say your side of the story because they know my side of the story.
Yeah. So I mean, every time my mom sees Steph, she thinks there's going to be like some miracle that happens because it just kind of does. So she, is always anticipating something, whether it happens or not. And Steph came up to my cottage for Thanksgiving to spend some time with us and to hang out. And my mom, I think in the back of her mind, was hoping that she would hear from her dad and hoping that something would happen. And this was also going to be the first occasion that Steph would be around both my mom and both of my uncles for an extended period of time. You had met them, but you'd never really hung out with the three of them in one room together.
Yeah, and by this point, they had all listened to the podcast. So I was super nervous.
Right.
Because they had heard episode 4 and they had heard episode 9. And I don't know if anything else was out by then, but I was like, oh, like there's so much expectation. But they weren't pressuring me or anything. It was just like, of course they're hopeful. Like if someone's around, like I was hopeful, but I just didn't know how to control it at this point.
Right. And this is my grandfather who'd passed, who, all of us think about and talk about, and he's such a big part of holding traditions in our family. And it was such a big deal for Steph to have channeled him. Is that the proper terminology?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Channeled him to my mom. So obviously my uncles were very excited about this. So anyways, the day is coming where Steph needs to pack up and leave and go home. And my mom kind of had this like devastating, sad puppy look on her face of like, but nothing happened. Like nothing happened. And I mean, for various reasons, you needed to leave to attend something of your family's function.
I was supposed to go to my dad's that night. But that night was your Thanksgiving dinner when everybody was going to be coming over and being together. And they were all like wanting to meet me. And your mom's like, you can't leave. Like, I just remember her face. And I was so torn because I was like, do I go to my dad's? Do I stay here? And I called my dad and I ended up staying.
Yep.
So maybe just kick it off from like when we all sat down for dinner, because you were sitting beside me and I grabbed your leg.
Yes. You were sitting beside me for dinner. Grabbed my leg like hard, like pretty firm. I was like, what? And I think you said he's here.
Yeah. And like, what ran through your mind?
Well, I was, when someone says it to you, it's almost like your eyes dart around being like, who's here? Where? What do you mean? Obviously I knew exactly who you were talking about, but you look around for something visual because that's just what we're so used to doing. Right. Mm. So your eyes kind of dart around and you're looking around. And I said to you, we had just started dinner. Like we had just had like a big cheers, like a toast to Thanksgiving and whatever. And we were about to dive into our meals. And I think I said to you, like now, like is right now the time? Like right now.
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, like right now. So I think I then tapped on my mom and was like,
yeah, because I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to interrupt this family dinner when I was the only guest. And you didn't know what to do. And you're like, well, let's just tell my mom. And your mom was sitting on the other side of me. So we both look at your mom. What was that experience like when I was talking? Because that was like more aimed towards your uncles. And I remember your grandpa saying like, I've talked a lot to your mom. Like now I need to talk to my sons kind of thing. So when I was kind of channeling your grandfather, what was going through your mind? Like, what were you thinking?
You know what? I think what so stands out to me is how beautiful of an experience it is for someone to feel that sense of acknowledgement and connectedness from someone on the other side. Like I could just see in both of my uncles' faces, similarly to my mom, that, it's almost like you'd been waiting your entire life for this message. Yeah, like you'd been waiting your entire existence just to hear that your father thinks that you're doing the right thing when you're 60 years old. And for one of my uncles, he died when he was 3. So having that reassurance or having that, I see you, son type of feeling you could just see on their faces that it was a lifetime of want.
I remember like after the dinner, like all 14 people at the table or however many we all had tears in our eyes. And we were just hugging, and these people that I just met maybe an hour earlier, like really met, and all your cousins and everything, we were just embracing and sharing this experience that is literally indescribable, the connection that I had with your family after that. Because I
Oh
get
my
it. I
God,
feel
it's
like
so deep.
yeah, and it was beautiful, like, just sitting with your uncles after and them just telling me about their dad, and they said, "Can I just tell you about him because we feel like you know so much, but, like, you don't know him." And I was like, "No, I don't," and I got to learn about your grandpa, and we had, like, these amazing conversations with your cousins, and it was so beautiful, like, I was so happy I didn't leave after that happened. I was so nervous, and then it happened, and I was like, "Oh, like, this was amazing," and how do you even describe it to someone afterwards? Like, how this isn't doing it any justice at all to describe the mood in the room at that time.
No, it was so moving. And I mean, for some context, my grandma and grandfather had only been married for about 9 years when he died, and my grandma never remarried. She then became the sole provider for her 3 kids. They were very poor, and she still to this day looks up at the sky and says, "Good night, Bobby," every single night. So
Oh,
he was such a big part of her and their lives, and the fact that he died when everyone was so young and that it was so unexpected. He holds a lot of weight in our family and holds a lot in terms of the strength that my grandma had to overcome to raise these 3 kids on her own as a widow. And, at the time didn't even have a job or a career. She was a stay-at-home mom and had to turn her life around. So although this one event happened so long ago, it really did set the stage for such a monumental and important role that my grandmother took on, and then both my uncles and my mom then took on from there, because it really just it gives you so much strength going through a situation like that. And to have now this group of people where then their kids and their partners and spouses get to hear these messages from Steph. It's just like it's so wild. And afterwards, like you said, Steph, you sat and had individual conversations with both my uncles and my mom afterwards, because they wanted to tell you more. It was so wild, and there was just so much love in the room. There was so much, for my verbiage and language, I would say so much spirituality was felt and so much energy, and you just kind of have this calming reassurance that everyone is connected. It's really cool. I almost feel speechless. I don't know how to explain it.
and I think that is the hard part, is it leaves you speechless. And one of the things your grandpa did say that I remember was that he was so proud of his family for still being together, and he kind of acknowledged everyone taking the time to be together for Thanksgiving because everybody was there. The kids were there, and he said, "I love this. Like, this is what I wanted my family to be." And he was so proud of everybody, and I was crying. And it's funny because I'm not a crier, and I say that in the podcast, but except for when I'm channeling spirit, I'll cry on the drop of a hat, but normally Steph doesn't cry.
This is true. Being her friend, this is true.
Yeah. Well, I love that you were able to come on today and share your experience. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, anytime. I am so proud of you and to be your friend and to be on the receiving end of this beautiful gift that you have. And you've truly enhanced every person in my family's life because of this gift. So I'm so grateful.
Oh, you're so sweet. So we are best friends, and you are a super cool person. So I want to give you the space to plug your podcast and your business. You have an amazing social impact movement, Heroic Humans. Follow them on Instagram, but let the listeners know where they can find you, what you do, about your podcast. I want to share everything.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Steph. So, Heroic Humans is, as Steph mentioned, a social impact movement. And what we are is a space that essentially acknowledges and celebrates acts of heroism from across the globe. So, initially, this looked like a blogging platform where people would write in to acknowledge people's stories or their own story. And as of recent, I've turned that page into more of a podcasting platform where I can interview these people and hear their stories, and they can share their stories from their own voices. And it's a way for me to be able to amplify not only their stories, but also their voices in their own words. I have a background in broadcast journalism, so it was so natural for me to pick up a mic and tell stories these ways. So to pick up a mic and tell these stories in that format. So the Heroic Humans podcast is a place where you can hear inspiring stories, lived experiences, different journeys, whether it's an upcoming entrepreneur or a cancer survivor, or about incredible friendship or resilience or courage or bravery. It's a place to tell stories. So that is Heroic Humans. You can find more about it on Instagram is primarily where I share a lot of the information. And the Instagram handle is The Heroic Humans. So THE Heroic Humans.
That's awesome. And I will have everything linked below, the Instagram, the website. And Dana, you're such an amazing storyteller. I love hearing your voice. And from listening through your podcast, I kind of get my little fix of you because you can tell that you're sitting in your passion. And I love the conversations that you have on your podcast. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Dana, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I love that my listeners got to hear your side of the story.
Thank you so much, Steph.
So that was my interview with Dana, who, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I've channeled 7 of her family members. If you haven't listened to all of the episodes with Dana's family, I will link them all down below in the description, and I will also leave all of Dana's links. So if you would like to find her podcast or find her on Instagram, it'll all be there, easy access for you. If you have not already, please subscribe to the podcast. I release new episodes every Tuesday. And if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and a review, I would really appreciate it. It helps me out in the podcast world to help more people find the podcast. Until next Tuesday, everyone, have a great week. Bye.